waste time up here. So right now we have Kurumi talking about Shakedex. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here today to talk about Shakedex. So I pulled one of his other sessions that he gave last year at NamesCon around September timeframe. He gave a little presentation about Shakedex that was really good, really comprehensive. And I know it sucks that this is a recording, but I really wanted to include this because I think that Shakedex is definitely a cornerstone of Handshake and kind of like the technology that we want to aim for, decentralized exchange, you know? Um, and this has to do with Matt's NFT project that he's going to be presenting later today as well. So this will kind of give you a background of what Shakedex is, how to interact with it, and stuff like that, so you can maybe participate in Matt's NFT auction and get some cool art related to Handshake, and support open source developers. As 50% of the proceeds will be donated to the HNS fund. But yeah, I don't want to take up any more time here. I'm going to let the video play up here, and I hope you guys all learn a little bit something about Shakedex and how to interact with it.
I'm Kurumi. I'm an anime character, and I make open source software for Handshake. I've done a bunch of things in the space. So I've been involved with Block Explorer. I've contributed to Bob. I also made the API that the Bob extension talks to. But today, we're really going to be talking about Shakedex, which was sort of my entry into the Handshake space and one of my favorite projects that I've had the opportunity to work on and lead. And Shakedex is really two things. And I'm going to get into the details of what these two things are as the presentation goes on. But it's both an open protocol that facilitates the exchange of these names. And like I mentioned, I'll explain what an open protocol is. But it's also a set of products that make interacting with that protocol really, really easy. And understanding the interplay between those two things is really important, not just to understanding Shakedex, but also understanding crypto and some of my points at the end about how to get started contributing in a space like this one. So if you've ever done traditional domain exchange, you've probably seen a process similar to this one. You give your name to some escrow, and there's usually like a trusted intermediary like your GoDaddy or your Dan.com or whatever that kind of acts as the broker. Someone signs an agreement saying that they're willing to buy this name, and then the funds get exchanged and the names get exchanged. And so in the case of Shakedex, the process is really, really similar. The first thing that happens is you transfer your name to an escrow address that protects the buyer. So escrow address sounds really fancy, but you can think of it as just an address on the blockchain that is subject to the constraints that I've written out in plain English for you on this slide. I won't get into too much of the details of how the Handshake blockchain works, but there are two things you need to know. When you own a Handshake name, it's possible for you to revoke it, which means you basically just ditch it back to the public auction pool. It's kind of like saying, well, I don't want to sell you this art anymore, so I'm going to put it in a paper shredder. And you can also back out of a transfer once it's been initiated. That's called a cancel. And if I'm buying a name, I don't want either of those things to happen. So the point of the escrow is to programmatically prevent those things from happening. So that's the first step of the protocol. We send it to the escrow. The next thing is I create a bunch of binding agreements that then protect me, the seller. And what these agreements say is they say that anybody who pays me a certain amount after a certain date, and I'll explain the significance of the date a little bit later on, is going to get this name. So when you combine this with the escrow, both parties are protected. The buyer's protected and the seller's protected. And that's really important because there is no ICANN, there is no GoDaddy or whoever else that you can go to for dispute resolution. We need to make sure that, the code is written in a way such that everybody is protected by default, because in blockchain land, once a transaction is executed, it's atomic. There's no way back. So the last step then is to fund. So somebody includes, the buyer includes the agreement to pay the funds. They also include the funds. Both of these are signed with the buyer and seller's private keys, and then this gets broadcast on the blockchain. And at this point in time, the name is the buyer's. Technically speaking, the buyer has to wait 48 hours, and that window allows the seller time to cancel. But remember, the escrow contract prevents you from canceling. So you basically just have to wait 48 hours, finalize the transfer, and then you're done. The name is yours. And this was done completely without any type of intermediary. You don't have to KYC your counterparty. You don't have to know anything about them. All you need to know is that the things that you're signing conform to this protocol. And that's one of the beautiful things about crypto. The technology basically informs the relationship between buyer and seller and allows really interesting things to happen. But this alone isn't really interesting enough. And the reason it's not interesting enough is because most people want price discovery for their names. So if I just go out and say I'm selling this name for $2,000, that's one thing. But if I have a really valuable TLD, I want to basically put it up for auction. And so if we use the date clause of the pre-signed agreement, and I combine multiple of them, we can create an auction. And I'm going to show you how that works. So let's start with one of these. So we're going to say 5,000 handshake after October 31st. 4,500 handshake after November 1st, so on and so forth until I reach my reserve price. What I end up with is a Dutch auction. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, a Dutch auction is basically an auction where the price starts high and ends at a lower reserve price, and the price is lowered periodically as time goes on. So when I took this screenshot, it was about a month ago. This particular name started at 22,000 and is now at 21,000 and is going to end at 20,000. And again, all of this is enforced entirely using the programmability properties of the Handshake blockchain. And this is, in my opinion, really, really cool. But there's another problem here. It's really difficult for normal people to kind of wrap their head around like how these protocols work. There's lots of protocols on the internet. Every website you go to, is talked to using the hypertext transfer protocol. But to most people, that's just I'm visiting a website. So Shakedex, the protocol, is then built into a bunch of Shakedex supporting products, of which Bob Wallet is one of them. So this screenshot was taken directly from Mike's amazing tutorial on how to buy and sell handshake names using Shakedex in Bob. So many thanks to Mike for putting this together. But the idea here is that, you need something to custody your crypto keys and custody your money, because at no point in that protocol does Shakedex ever take control over user funds. And that's a feature, not a bug. But it does introduce a dependency on a wallet. And so as a result of how blockchain communities work, Bob integrated directly with Shakedex. And so here's how that works. When you go into Bob, there's an exchange tab. And what you can see is all the names that you've listed. So you can see pull request, surfboard, and tour were all names that Mike listed. There's a list of fills, which basically means these are the auctions that I bought that I'm waiting to finalize the transfer to myself for. And then a list of live auctions. And these are the actual auctions that are live on the website. When I go and create a listing, this is going to define the start, end price, and duration of my auction. And when I click that place listing button, when the escrow transfer is complete, Bob is going to go and upload all of those pre-signed agreements to shakedex.com, which is a website that just collects those so people can see what's available and functions very similarly to any other kind of domain trading website that you would expect to see on the traditional web. And lastly, when you want to place a bid, you just click the fill button and this pops up and you click fulfill. And at that point, the auction is complete. So I'm going to show you what shakedex.com looks like now. Again, keep in mind that this website is basically read-only. All of the write stuff happens within Bob. And you can see that with the little cat icon next to fulfill auction. But when you post your name, you're going to get a visualization that looks like this that shows you the state of the auction at a particular point in time. And then you can also go into this view and view all of the names that are available, their current bids, and also manually submit your pre-signs if you want to, like if you generated them using a CLI tool or something different. So that's sort of the product side. But Handshake, really, really early as far as blockchains go. There's a ton of infrastructure that needs to be built. So as a result, these are the sort of current stats that we're looking at for Shakedex. So 26,000 HNS is about $8,000 of volume. We've done about 2,000 auctions, of which 224 have been purchased by a counterparty. And, Handshake is really early in its life, and these numbers, I think, are, pretty good, because they're numbers that were created despite how difficult it is right now to interact with Shakedex. Users really, really want a kind of web-based experience that mimics the sort of centralized websites that they're used to. When they have to go into a desktop application that uses gigabytes of data in order to, store all of the blockchain data and validate it, it's a huge barrier for people to overcome. And the other thing is, telling people to do things like custody keys, etc., are all really, really scary to the average user. So even though Shakedex itself was a really powerful concept, there's a ton of sort of underlying base layer infrastructure that still remains to be built, and a bunch of work that we still have to do as developers to get Handshake to the point where it's kind of the decentralized primitives anyway, are going to be usable by regular people. So I'm going to walk you through some of Shakedex's roadmap and then kind of tie it all back together. So to help in this effort, we're going to integrate the Chrome extension. People have been really hammering the Chrome extension over the course of this conference, and I think they're absolutely right to do that. That Chrome extension is going to be a massive unlock for not just Shakedex, but the entire Handshake community. Some of you may or may not be familiar with MetaMask. MetaMask is a Chrome extension wallet that Jackie actually worked on that custodies keys for the Ethereum chain. And what that lets you do is it lets you build a website that talks to the blockchain. And that's really, really cool, because it means you can do everything directly from the website that you're working on. So we're about to do this Shakedex redesign, which not only gives Shakedex a brand new coat of paint, but also gives you the ability to buy and launch auctions without ever leaving your browser, without ever having to download the entire chain state. It all happens directly within the Chrome extension. And I'm really, really excited about this, because I think if we pair this, with additional liquidity and additional people interested in using Handshake, we can create an amazing outcome that I'm going to walk you through separately. So a little bit more about Shakedex's upcoming roadmap. So again, all these things, so this redesign and then all these things that I'm about to talk to you about, they depend on there being robust wallet infrastructure that integrates directly in the browser, because no one's going to use Shakedex if we don't have that. But once we've integrated that, we can do some really cool things that I'm going to enumerate these really, really quickly. The first thing we want to build is storefronts. So the nice thing about Handshake, and this is very different from the traditional domain name system, is that whenever you synchronize a Handshake node, you basically get the state of every single top-level domain on the quote-unquote internet. And so what that means is people can put text records or other things inside of those domains that allow them to basically list their domain name for sale without ever having to go to a specific website. So anybody can go and create a big list of listings, of domain name listings, just based on the state of the blockchain at a current point in time. And what that in turn lets us do is on Shakedex create binding offers. So if I know that so-and-so is interested in selling their name, I can create a binding offer using similar smart contracts to the ones that Shakedex already supports. And that seller can just click the button, accept this. No need for KYC, no need for a new website login, no need to know anything about your counterparty. You just click the button and the name is exchanged, and you're able to trust that the code is going to make that happen well. Next, as we get more volume, Shakedex will start taking fees. But one of the nice things about the way that Shakedex is architected is that the only kind of centralized component is the Shakedex API. And the Shakedex API, even though it is, a database that I run, it's open. So anybody that wants to put Shakedex listings on their website, so if you're a regular registrar, if you're somebody else that's interested in crypto, can get that data automatically. And if you then facilitate a transfer of one of these names using Shakedex, your platform, whatever it may be, can earn a rake on the exchange fees that Shakedex generates. And I anticipate as time goes on, those numbers will go up pretty significantly. Next, we're talking about more integrations. So this kind of follows from the monetization idea. We've got, I worked on Block Explorer, so I want to integrate it with that. Basically, the more ways people have to integrate with Shakedex, the better. And lastly, this is somewhat separate from Shakedex, but is really important to the functioning of a healthy blockchain. We need better infrastructure and we need better liquidity. And one of the best ways to do that is to partner with folks that are, in the traditional financial system to allow people to buy Handshake with a credit card and then use it immediately on Block Explorer, immediately on Shakedex. And that, I think, is going to create the kind of fun experience that we want people to have buying and selling these effectively like powerful NFTs through Handshake names. So I'm going to tie it all back together now. What I hope you've kind of seen from this talk is that none of these projects exist in a vacuum. This is very different from your kind of typical like industry conference where you've got lots of companies, but each company is kind of out to its own end, and the game is kind of zero sum in the sense that companies compete and then whoever wins kind of kills the other one. With a chain like Handshake, the more people use it, the more utility it has, the more people who hold the token are going to be better. The better off the people are going to be who hold the token. So sort of you create the rising tide that raises all boats. So at the bottom layer, you have the chain itself. You have Handshake, which in this case was created by some of the best people in the industry. On top of that, you have your kind of custody hardware, things like Bob Wallet or Gohan, which is a wallet that I made. And then on top of that, you have your apps, or the apps that you make. Because now, like I mentioned at the beginning, is the best possible time to get involved in Handshake. I kind of like this diagram. I know that I made it and I'm not supposed to toot my own horn, but the reason why I like it is that like it kind of shows that every layer of the sort of crypto stack can enable a number of layers above it. Without Handshake, there's no Bob Wallet, there's no Shakedex. But the better Shakedex gets, the better people can build stuff on top of Shakedex that is interesting and drives utility and value to Handshake. And so to draw a parallel to another chain that's been very successful, I want to basically talk about Uniswap. So not everyone's familiar with Uniswap, but Uniswap is a decentralized exchange on Ethereum. Total value locked, it's sort of a crypto specific metric, but for those of you who aren't sort of super into crypto, you can think of it as like if Uniswap were a bank, how many assets does it manage? Even though Uniswap doesn't really manage anything because it's decentralized, but that doesn't really matter. Just think of it as like the number of assets that people are putting into this exchange. You can see that for a really, really long time, no one was using Uniswap for anything. And then all of a sudden, around about August, September of 2020, its value, like the total value locked, exploded. What created that jump in the total value locked? Well, it's this thing called DeFi summer. People realized that they could use Uniswap as this kind of infrastructure layer to facilitate the exchange of Ethereum tokens. And they then built all kinds of cool and interesting and fun things on top of that. And then people built things on top of that, etc. And the impact that this one team, the Uniswap team, has had on Ethereum as a whole has been enormous. Up until very recently, they were under 20 people. But that's the power of these open networks. Uniswap did not have to ask permission to build their exchange. They just went and did it. And then other people went and built on top of that. And that's now led to, Uniswap TVL of about, $6 billion and a total DeFi total value locked of, I think, like over $100 billion. But I'll have to check on the actual number. It changes on a daily basis. But anyway, the point is, these are the type of outcomes that you can create if you embrace the permissionless innovation that crypto provides you. Shakedex is just one such project. I'm just one anime character in a basement somewhere. And, I was able to create this thing without asking for anybody's permission. And it's seeing a degree of success despite how difficult it is to do things on Handshake. If you're interested in getting started, this is the time to do it. And, you've got people like me who are happy to donate our time to kind of onboard you into the community and make sure that, you're able to feel as welcomed as possible and do amazing things on top of this ecosystem. So that's about the end of my talk. Depending on how much time we have left, I'm happy to take questions. I'm going to have to minimize the screen share, see the chat. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. You can hit me up on Twitter, Kurumiimari1, Kurumiimari@protonmail.com. Don't forget the one on Twitter. The person who has the @Kurumiimari handle is weird. And then where else can people hit me up? Discord has a number that I can't remember on the end, but whatever. Twitter and email are good ways to hit me up, and then we can go from there if you're interested in chatting with me. Otherwise, thank you very much.
All right. I hope everybody learned a little bit about Shakedex. Again, this was a recording, and Kurumi wasn't here, unfortunately, but maybe next year we'll get him. In the Q&A, I saw some questions about SLDs and stuff. We're actually going to be covering decentralized SLDs later today, or hold on. Oh yeah, we're going to be hitting decentralized SLDs later today. But I do not want to run us too much into time. I'm going to end this session, and we're going to move on to a panel about the philosophical importance of the DWeb. So I hope you guys enjoy that.